I would win the Quiet Place War because I am not clumsy. I am very quiet, and I know how to kill aliens.
I think there's moments where I think I would do really well in A Quiet Place, but apparently when it comes to eating, specifically apples, I cannot do that quietly. So I guess I wouldn't be able to eat apples.
Welcome back, Fright Night friends.
Oh yeah, hi everybody.
If you're just now figuring it out, this week we're talking about A Quiet Place.
This is Scary Movie Fright Night,
a podcast about two guys who just watch scary movies. I'm Chris, and I love scary movies.
And I'm Sam, and I hate scary movies. My body just shook. Give me the heebie-jeebies. No, don't. All you have to do is stay inside in your bed, and then you won't get murdered. Okay. And now you have that recorded.
We're back to talk about A Quiet Place. This movie was from the theme sci-fi horror. So we get too far into it. Sam, what do you think? Do you think it's super sci-fi-y? I don't know. I feel like it was kind of a cheater sci-fi. Like there were aliens. They used technology to like defeat the aliens. But like when you think sci-fi, I don't know that I think A Quiet Place.
You just asked me a question and then answered it.
Yeah, that's what I do. This is the one-man show here.
Well, I was kind of thinking the same thing. I was like, there is a category that this could fit into, which I only learned about reading after watching the movie and reading of, sensory horror. Right? So there was other like Bird Box. There was a movie I didn't see called Hush.
Yeah.
I think came out around the same time, which also featured a lead who was deaf. I think the actress was not deaf.
Okay.
The character was deaf. Anyway.
Interesting.
So that's okay. Maybe it didn't quite fit with the theme, but it introduced me to a new theme of horror.
That is true. Well, and I mean, we've talked about it a million times, right? Like there's a lot of overlap with any of these movies. I like to reach back to this one in particular a million times. High Life.
Oh gosh.
Yes, it was space horror, but it was also sad horror, depressing horror, hopeless horror, black hole horror, right? There's lots of, whole horror in itself is its own thing. It's trypophobia.
Oh, that's where you're going with that. Right? Okay, trypophobia. Yeah.
Oh,
yeah. Okay, good save. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we keep this R and below here.
Yeah.
Anyway, before we get into the recap, I have to tell you something that has nothing to do with sensory horror. It has to do with how you sensorize fear.
Good connection there. All right.
So for those that just started listening this season, hopefully you listened to season 1. But season 1 was quite a journey because we started out with a few movies. Sam really kind of got into it. And then we hit a point where Sam got a little self-conscious and was like, oh man, is anything going to scare me? And that point was when we watched Evil Dead Rise in theaters. And he left and he was like, oh, I really enjoyed it, but it didn't scare me. So I have to tell you this. So there's a guy I work with. His name's Joe. Hopefully, Joe, you're listening. This is a shout out to you. So him and his wife, at the time of recording this, they're still making their way through season 1. They're late bloomers. Late listeners.
That's all right. All are welcome.
Late bloomers. Yeah. Yeah, they didn't know about it. It's fine. Not everyone did. But they do like a date night, right? So they watch the movie and then a few days later they listen to the episode together. Like it's the most ideal outcome of this podcast you could probably ever find, because he doesn't love scary movies. He doesn't like
scary movies, but his
wife does. He doesn't really love them. He's never really been into them.
Romance for the two of them.
We're creating
horror-romance.
Romance. Horror-romance. Oh, that's going on the next t-shirt. I'm writing that down. Horror-romance, not with a W.
Oh, I just love that we're bringing people together for date night. That's so special.
That's actually not my point, although that is a good point.
Oh, okay.
No, but the point of this was they'd just seen the movie, but not listened to the episode yet. And he was like, oh my God, I was so scared. How scared was Sam? And I said, no spoilers, just listen to the episode. He's like, what do you mean? I was like, well, we were in the theater and there was lots of people talking and Sam, suspension of belief.
And it's funny. And it's really funny.
And there are some funny parts, right? And you pull yourself out of it and like only see the funny. But it was very interesting talking to him because he also laughed. He also saw the funny parts and the campy parts, but he also felt the scariness. We got on a whole like psychoanalytical thing about Sam and how like it's like when we watch
I'm a psychopath.
yeah. No, it's like when you watch The Exorcist, like we've talked about like you have to connect and you have to find something to connect to.
Yes,
because he himself is like, well, I don't believe in like that sort of demonic possession, but the thought of being in there, and if that happens, you're screwed. Like there's no
so does
getting
he
out.
find himself like very easily what's the term, like suspending reality and just immersing himself in the story and being like, this is freaking scary?
I think he is more along the lines of me in that like I can kind of just get into it and think, man, if this were the scenario, like we're screwed, like everyone's dying. So anyway, we had a little talk about your work. It was all good, of course. But
good.
Like
good.
every time he watches another episode, he gives me a fist bump and he's like, man, great stuff. Anyway, I just wanted to say that, we're not the only ones that think you're a weirdo. There's more people out there. Okay.
I really would like everyone who's listening to tell, like every episode, tell us what your scary rating on the scary scale
that's fair
is for every episode.
Yes.
Like I want to see it in the comments on the can you comment on one episode? I don't think that's possible. Whatever.
You can't. Instagram, go to our Instagram, TikTok, go to the YouTube, go to something. Send us an email.
I feel like we're inciting like a scary war here of like what is scary and what's not scary.
If we could get everyone just to give us just the number, like what's your rating, get an average and just see where that average comes out in contrast or in comparison to yours, right? Like I think that would be super interesting. So that goes out to all of you listening.
Tell us.
Let us know what you think, especially the ones where we're like, where you watch the menu and I'm like, oh yeah, it was a little scary, and Sam's like 7.
Wait. But here's the thing about asking people how you would rate the scariness of a movie, right? Mm-hmm. Asking general population, like, okay, we get a sample size, right, of how people would rate movie. But here's the thing. Right. The people who are watching the movies are the people who like scary movies anyway. What about all of the other Sams out there who like wouldn't actively choose to watch scary movies and sort of develop a sense of like how scary you find different I feel like we're missing a point of view.
Okay, well then that just means you need to network and you need to recruit those people. So mission given. We got to
build you. We got to build an army. People who think they hate scary movies, and I hear this all the time when people are like, "Oh, you do a podcast about scary movies?" I hate scary movies. I'm like, "Yeah, I know, me too, but guess what? You shouldn't. You should give them a chance because they're not all that bad. It's an experience." Yeah. Anyway, we should talk about A Quiet Place.
Oh, should we? Yeah, because this podcast, we've just been yapping our mouth off, and it has not been a quiet place in here. You see what I did there? I made a Quiet Place reference. Yeah. Okay. So, wow, we're still at the beginning of the episode. We haven't even recapped it yet.
Oh, right. Yeah. Tell us about who's in it, and then I'll recap it.
Okay. Quiet Place came out in 2018, directed by John Krasinski himself. Well done, Mr. Krasinski. Also written by him, as well as Scott Beck and Brian Woods, starring his wife, Emily Blunt, himself, and Millicent Simmons, who played their daughter. And I'm going to talk about this later, but like I didn't know anyone's names. We'll talk about it after you recap it. But her name was Reagan, by the way. Since we've done a lot of Exorcist this season. IMDb gave it a 7.5 out of 10. Rotten Tomatoes, 96%. Outstanding. With an audience score of 83.
That's pretty good.
A little bit lower than I would expect based on, I think, what you and I have to say, which we haven't discussed yet. Overall, great. But for those of you that didn't watch it, or maybe you fell asleep because it was so quiet, Sam, why don't you go ahead and recap it for the folks at home?
That's funny you say about not knowing the characters' names. I didn't realize until I had to go like reread a synopsis of the plot, make sure I didn't miss any juicy parts. Yeah. And as I was reading, I was like, oh, these are their names. I didn't even know what their names were. So if you watch the movie and you didn't know their names, you're about to learn. So the movie is centered on the Abbott family, a family who's living in a post-apocalyptic world where sightless aliens with very keen hearing and impenetrable armor have taken over the world, killed most of the population. And the family lives on a self-sufficient farm, which they have totally soundproofed to protect themselves from these aliens. The movie starts, they're in a nearby town looking for supplies. They have I think he was like 2 or 3 year old son. He finds a toy and you see the fear in their eyes when they see him holding this toy, because they all know that if he pushes a button on the toy and it sets off a sound, immediately these aliens will come find them and get them. So they get the toy out of his hands, they take the batteries out of the toy and put it aside, and they explain to him, it's too loud, you can't bring this. We also see them using sign language to communicate with each other. We also learn very early on that the daughter Reagan is deaf because we see her cochlear implant. So anyway, the boy, or Reagan, actually, the daughter, takes the toy, it was a little space shuttle, and she gives it back to the 2-year-old. And unbeknownst to everybody else, the 2-year-old grabs the or 3, 4, I don't know how old he is. He grabs the batteries that they had taken out of the shuttle and he puts them back in. So they're walking home. They've created this path of sand so that they can walk silently back to their farm, and the boy sets off the sound on the toy, and he's walking behind everybody. They all turn and they see him get taken by an alien. Devastating. Well, fast forward to a year later, they're still in their farm, they're thriving. The mom, Evelyn is her name, is pregnant. And that we watch the ways they're interacting. We learn that they've clearly developed this like system of survival. They have this family bond. The father, Lee, and the son, Marcus, go out to go get fish from traps in a river. And the daughter, Reagan, wants to go with them. They're like, you can't come with us. So she's upset. She goes off to her little brother's grave. So the mother is at home alone. We learn there's a waterfall scene with the father and the son where we learn there's a little bit of dialogue, and we learn that it's okay to make noise as long as there's another noise that's louder. It's part of how they survive and trick the aliens. So the mom is at home alone, and she goes into labor unexpectedly. She's going down to the basement to get ready, I guess, and she steps on a nail. So in a world where you can't make any noise, stepping on a nail is like the worst possible thing that can happen. She drops something, makes a lot of noise. The aliens come to their farm. They're coming into the house. The father and the son come back. They have to figure out how to rescue the mom. So this sets off a chain of events throughout the night where they're sneaking around, creeping around, using timers, using fireworks, trying to do things to distract the aliens. The mom gives birth in a bathtub. They get the newborn baby into a soundproof box. The room that the mom is in ends up flooding, so now she's in this situation where she's got to get her baby with the soundproof box out. There's aliens in the house. It's very tense. At the end, just kind of fast forward through all that a little bit, the kids end up getting trapped inside of a truck. Aliens like pounding on the truck, smashing the glass, about to get the kids. The dad realizes, like, this is it. This is the only way for him to protect his kids. In order to save them, he has to sacrifice himself. So we see him shout, gets the attention of the alien. We know, like, that is the end of the dad. The kids make it back into the house with the mom, the baby. The aliens are in there. And what ends up happening, the big reveal at the end of the movie, is that Reagan's cochlear implant somehow amplifies sound in such a way that it disturbs the aliens, that they like can't handle it, and they end up defeating the aliens that way. They end up using a shotgun. So at the end of the movie ends with, I think, the mom, Evelyn, loading the shotgun, and we know that there's about to be more alien battling coming. We assume they're going to be successful and go on to survive. And that is the end.
The end. My heart was not a quiet place watching this movie. I don't know about yours.
Had you seen it before, or was this your first time?
So I had seen it before. I saw it when it came out. You know, like most things, I hadn't really seen it since. And so what I will say, kind of to sum it up, is I forgot how good this movie was. Like how incredibly good it was, especially, and I've said it kind of before on here, you know, that when I really start breaking stuff down and having to think about details and kind of making some notes and prep for these episodes, it gives me a little bit more time to iterate on it. And the more I thought about it, I was just thoroughly impressed. You know, John Krasinski comes out of left field and just decides and makes this movie and just like, it's pretty genius. It's pretty genius. It's pretty.
In what way?
Amazing.
What's the genius that you see in it?
So like there's genius in the thoughtfulness of the characters and the preparation. There's genius in the story. So kind of genius in the movie itself. Like so because in a horror movie you're looking for tension, right? You're looking for that fear or that tension, right? When you talk about thriller, suspense, edge of your seat. So when you have a movie like this where everyone is required to be quiet, any noise in the movie automatically equals tension.
Yeah.
Right. The silence just means any scary movie I think you watch, and someone could tell me if there's a scary movie that doesn't fit this, but any scary movie you watch, generally when it goes quiet, it means something bad's about to happen. And so there's always suspense associated with silence, right? Silence equals suspense. And so like the genius of this like mostly silent movie is that they're creeping around, and at any given time, if they do anything wrong, something bad could happen. And so you're just kind of sitting there waiting, like with the kid, and they're moving slow, and they take the rocket and they take the batteries out, and you're like, okay. And then he grabs the batteries, you're like, no. And then when a loud noise comes, and of course, I watched the movie with my headphones on, so there's the music. Obviously, this is a movie where, because there's not a lot of noise or a lot of dialogue, like the music is pivotal to giving you those feelings. So, and the way the actors express themselves. You go back to when his son, like the rocket goes off, and he's looking back at his kid, and he immediately just starts running as fast as he can, and the kid's sitting there, and you see the look on John Krasinski's face, and then you see the look on her daughter's face. She sees the look on his face.
Yeah.
And
because she didn't hear the sound of the toy. She
reads it. She turns around, and so much acting without vocals is required.
Yeah.
That it's just it was just genius. So like so I kind of went all over the place, but it holds attention. Like the whole thing just held tension. Where there's noise, like I was nervous. I with his son dying right off the bat, I wanted to know, like what were you immediately just like, oh my God, the kid died at the beginning, like there's no hope?
Okay, well, so I have a confession. I have this really bad habit on airplanes of like watching other people's screens.
So you weren't watching the movie when it happened? You've got to be kidding me.
So no, I've seen that beginning.
Okay,
I knew the beginning.
Okay,
so I had never.
Did we both watch this on an airplane? That's weird. Anyway.
No, well, I watched the movie at home, but like 4 years ago or something, I remember I've seen that opening scene on somebody else's screen on an airplane because I get distracted really easily, and sometimes I'll just watch other people's movies. Yeah. So I knew that was I was like, I remember something really devastating happening with the kid, like at the beginning of the movie. So I kind of knew that was coming.
Okay,
and it is shocking. You're like, oh shit, that was a child. That sucks. I mean, it sucks when anybody gets taken or killed or whatever, but so that, happened. But I like what you said about the genius of the movie. I think what I liked about it is that it felt the only way I was like, how do I describe this? It was smart. Like the fear was by design. So what I mean by that is they didn't rely on gore. There was a little bit of like the nail through the foot that you're like, but like, it wasn't super gory. There wasn't, I don't think there was a ton of like jump scares, maybe a couple.
There were
token
some
jump scares. Like
there was, and it's mostly because like if something loud happens, it kind of like, or when, the creatures kind of come out of left field. I noted that, I mean, there were some jump scares, but not your usual. It's not The Conjuring, right? It's not like,
but I like, yeah. I like how they took a concept. It's actually kind of the same as like Freddy Krueger, the idea that like if you fall asleep, that's how he gets you, and that's just sleeping is just a thing that we all do. And so they took a concept of something really simple of just making noise, and they found a way to design this world where making noise will get you killed.
Yeah.
And I just thought it was intelligent, right? It wasn't just like slasher gore, like we're gonna scare you, boo, scary ghost. It was like, what if? It was a big thought experiment. That's what it was. It was a big what if, which then watching the movie, I'm thinking like, oh wow, what would how would oh, that's genius that they laid the sand down so they could walk along the sand and know that they had a safe place to walk. They had marked the spots on the stairs that would creak, or that wouldn't creak, right? So they said, here's where you walk through the house.
Preparation.
So, yeah. What are all the things that you would have to do to figure out like how to survive. Where do they go to the bathroom? Like they can't flush the
That's a
toilets,
good
I'm assuming.
question.
Like
That's a good question.
so many things.
Yeah. I noted that the contingency planning that family did was next level, but like that's what you would have to do, right? I forgot about like the marking of the wood panels, right? But like the fireworks for the loud noise, like in case of emergency, the red lights, the cry box for the baby, they obviously had some months to prep that. The soundproof room, like every night they're adding layers to it. It's just part of their nightly
Yeah.
routine while they're playing, they're
Yeah.
playing games. The truck. So like just when you thought you'd seen everything perfectly planned out, and then he's like, get to the truck. And we're like, oh, he's saying get to the truck. And it's because it's perfectly positioned to drop the
Oh,
e-brake and get them to home. Like,
I didn't realize that.
yeah, it was
I mean, I
strategically
saw that
placed.
happen, but I didn't think
Yeah.
about the fact that they planned that out.
Yeah,
Did
but
it
that's
on
why the kid
purpose.
knew he dropped the e-brake. And
Smart.
then they got home, and they outran the aliens, were able to get in the house. It was well, like the level of thought that went
The
into,
red
if this family is
lights.
gonna survive, this is
Yeah.
how they're gonna do it.
Yeah.
It
The
was,
bonfire communicating with the neighbors.
yeah,
Whole situation. Yeah.
yep. It was, yeah, it was well done. It was like you said, it was smart. And I also appreciated, just from a general horror movie perspective, they did a good job of not showing too much of the aliens too early, right? It's that the whole concept of
Mm,
what you don't see that scares you, right? That you and I see eye
yeah.
to eye on for the other things
Yeah.
that we may or may not. But no, but the alien was always out of frame or very blurry, and even when the kid was taken at the beginning, you saw something coming,
Yeah.
and you knew it was big and terrifying and strong, and you didn't know what it was, and then the kid was gone.
But I like that eventually we get to see the alien and
Yeah,
they gave us a couple good long takes of like what it they let us take it in. You
yep,
see the inside the ear, you see the weird skull
yeah,
thing that's like opening and closing, and that was just I don't know, kind of like fascinating and like a
yep,
really interesting design for an
yeah.
alien, and
I agree.
I thought it was cool.
Yeah,
I like how they took two, like they took two of the worst possible things that could happen in a
mhm,
world where you cannot make any sound:
right.
stepping on a nail and
Mhm.
giving birth.
Yeah. And then third is your son being taken right in front of you. Yeah.
Well, that was pretty bad too, right? You can't
No,
scream out.
and I, just we're going to just keep talking about the genius of the movie, but the way that the emotion tied into it, right? Because all this,
Mm,
so the kid being taken lays the groundwork, like most opening scenes to these movies, right? Because a year later, the daughter still thinks that like her father blames her for this, right? When really they're not allowed in the basement. He's down in the basement, like reading all these books about the ear canal, so he can try to make this thing for her. And there's been this distance. She blames herself, and all the emotion taken up with their child being gone. And then, as you can probably imagine, a couple months later, she finds out she's pregnant. And so
mhm,
just like the emotional turmoil, and then at the end he's like, I should have been carrying him. My hands were empty. Or she say that? She said that.
She said
She's like, I
that.
was
Yeah, yeah,
tired. I was tired, but my hands were
yeah.
empty. And so there's so much emotional turmoil like involved with having to move on. And I was thinking about this too. Obviously, with young children, there's no real way to express like danger and the why, right? We don't touch hot stoves because it burns us. Well, if they touch a hot stove, they figure it out. How do you It's already hard enough with a very young child to get them to
Mhm,
understand danger and death and those sort of things. But they're in an environment where they can't talk. And
mhm,
like they're just like it's too loud. And the kid's probably seen a little bit, but we're only like a couple months in. So how
mhm.
do you get this tiny child to understand? That's the battle they have with the new baby. How do you
Yeah,
grow this child without making noise? I mean, that's anyway. It's it,
yeah.
and then to wrap up what I was saying about emotion, and then like of all things, the sequence of her childbirth, like her daughter's gone, the family's gone, it's dark, her water breaks, and then she steps on the nail, which is the forcing function to make the aliens come after the house, and she is just like doing everything in her soul to hold in every
The
whimper.
scream.
And it's just
Yeah.
it's the tension there is insane. And then of course, like the moment she finally cries out is the moment the rockets go off, and it's just well executed. It's like a symphony, you know what I mean? It's like the crescendo comes up, and then boom, and then the rockets, and then anyway.
It makes me want to tell people who are really loud in the gym, like, can't you suffer in silence? Emily Blunt stepped on a nail and she just held it all in. Like, we don't need to hear you struggling.
Have you seen A Quiet Place? Come on, what are you doing?
You guys would being not all survive.
Mad. Yeah, they wouldn't make it. It's fine.
Well, something that I thought was pretty fascinating. Well, my first question, and I think this actually we talked about this on a recent episode, is because we talk a lot about like the music, the impact of music in horror films and sound effects and jump scares, which got me thinking, how do people who are deaf feel about scary movies? Like, can you still get visually stimulated, and is the plot as tense as when you can't hear it, or you don't have the impact of the music? So I was trying to read a little bit just about how people who are deaf like or are interested in scary movies.
Right.
But then I started reading more about reactions specifically to this movie, and it was kind of fascinating to see what some of the mixed thoughts were about A Quiet Place.
Okay.
Well, here's the thing. So there were mixed reviews. I read a couple of different like articles and blog posts about from people who are deaf writing about the movie.
This movie that's about A Quiet Place.
About A Quiet Place, yeah. And some of the reactions were sort of the similar reaction that I had, which was, "Oh, this is really cool. It's really cool to see the representation. It's cool to see them using ASL." Even though I don't understand ASL,
right?
It's just like, I think it's fun to watch people.
Well, and because of note, right? The daughter is deaf in real life, right? The actress,
yes,
Millicent Simmons,
yes. I'm cautious saying that because I don't want to come across as like, oh, it's a spectacle. Like, oh, let me look at deaf people communicating with their hands. Like, oh. But I think it's really cool and fascinating that we as humans have a way to communicate that has nothing to do with speech,
right?
No verbal. So the initial reaction was like, oh, this is really cool. Like, good for them. Like, oh, they have representation. We're getting to see us ASL. There was one article that talked about like there are other films where being different or having a disability is something of the villain, and they were like, oh, I was glad that this movie, the character who had the disability, the character who was deaf, there was nothing wrong. She wasn't the villain, right? She was part of the family, and in many ways the hero.
Yeah.
But this is where then it kind of, once you kind of start unpacking a little bit, there's some elements that are somewhat problematic. So, for example, the cochlear implant. Now, you remember the scene where she was interacting with the dad about the cochlear implant? Do you remember how that went? He was like, she had one, but then he was like tinkering to try and find one that could help her hear better. Right. And he was like, here, at all. At all. He was like, here, use this one. And she was like, I don't want to. I don't want it. Well, that is like, I guess there's a little bit of controversy in the community, the deaf community, is that if you're telling me that you can take this technology and you can use it to hear, it almost implies like your deafness is something that needs to be fixed. I'll give you this technology and I'll fix your deafness so that you can be hearing like everybody else.
Right.
There's deaf people who are like, I don't want to be hearing like everybody else. I like being deaf, right? I have my own ways of interacting with the world. I don't need that. And you kind of saw that with the character of Reagan, right? And
it's interesting. In the real world, yes. I think in the context of this movie, you don't have very many tools at your disposal to hear. I mean, it's all like you're silent. Like, I don't know. I think it's interesting. It's definitely an interesting point, and maybe how they represented it could have been different. But the confines by which this movie was made, and by which those people only had certain amount of tools at their disposal, it's interesting. I think it changes the narrative a bit. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Well, and the point that this writer was trying to make, and I do this every episode. I like speed read through like a bunch of different articles. I should write down like, okay, this is where it came from. This is who the author was, so I could credit them properly. But they were like, when you think about cochlear implants from that point of view of like it's a piece of technology that's intended to fix my brokenness,
Yeah.
then and then that is also the thing that saves them in the end. It wasn't the character, the person of the daughter Reagan.
Hmm.
It was the technology that the dad had given her that,
Yeah.
and so in the moment it was kind of exciting. You're like,
Sure.
oh, they found a really cool way to defeat the alien. It's the
Yeah.
thing. And also plot hole, they were like, that's not how cochlear implants work. Like that is not what it would do. Like that was just total sci-fi nonsense, which I mean, I get that that's the whole point of a movie, right? I mean,
Sure.
why
Sure.
I'm sitting here saying I don't understand how that works, but also there's these aliens
Yeah. Facts.
that we don't
Facts.
know where they came from either. So at some
But
point I
that's
just
an
have to
interesting
suspend.
point though, that that like that it wasn't technically her that outsmarted it. Like she figured it out, but it was the device that ended up, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. I guess it was. I forgot about the whole thing with the microphone, and she
Yeah.
kind of had that moment of realization like, oh, this is the thing that's causing the alien.
Hmm.
Let's put it to the microphone and really, torture this thing. So,
Yeah.
I mean, it was her smarts
Yeah.
that figured that out. But I think so. This one author, it was an article in the Washington Post, I want to say,
Okay.
and she was saying like, she was basically saying, I'm glad that the character who is deaf is not the villain,
Hmm.
but we also have to be careful not to let the pendulum swing too far in the other way, where it's this like inspiration porn type thing, where it's
Okay.
like, oh, let's all feel good about ourselves because we're representing
Right.
like a disability.
Yeah.
Um, and she was like, how do you find the balance of celebrating the entirety of a person to
Yeah.
include their disability
Right.
without elevating it or like fetishizing it, right? Like,
Okay.
and I'm not saying they necessarily did that in this movie. Like
Right.
maybe
Right.
it would have been weird if they had said, "Oh, she has like supernatural vision or like can feel vibrations in the air," and then
Sure. Sure.
deaf people would have been like, "That's ridiculous." But I think it was just kind of an interesting take that like
Hmm.
the initial reaction of like, "Oh, let's feel good about ourselves because there's representation," but
Right.
then you take it a step further and you're like, it's a little more complex than that, and the entire deaf community isn't necessarily just going to be like, yay, like we love that this
Yeah.
movie exists.
Was
Like there's
there
mixed reactions.
did anything that you looked at like kind of just say that it was a good balance? Because I think that based on what you're saying, I don't think it went too far. I think it took a family and one person, one person's deaf. They're
Yeah.
trying to survive. I think that the father probably would be sitting here trying to make her a better device to help protect her. She might then say, I don't want it. You know what I mean? Because that kind of parallels the like, you can't make me wear it. I don't want to have to wear it. So it's representing that might be a real struggle
Yeah.
for whatever. She didn't express the why. And then at the end, she didn't have superpowers. They just kind of figured the thing out. So I just felt like it seemed like a kind of mid-level representation.
Like middle ground.
And the
Yeah.
actress herself took the role. So if she felt good about it, I don't know. Like I think that there's probably a lot more. I'd be curious to see what her opinion is of it. I mean, assuming she read the script and I don't know
Yeah.
how she feels, I mean, she was young, right? But what's her
Well,
opinion
like
on that?
it's not like a condemnation of the film.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
think it can be two things at the same time.
Mhm.
So I think it's really cool that there is deaf representation and that is a central theme, a central part of the movie. And I think there could be ways to like write it differently or frame it differently so that, because think about it this way too, is in the movie the fact that they have to be silent, they have like that
Yeah.
sound and speech and music are things that they want but they can't have.
Yeah.
But in the world of a deaf person, they don't have access to those things anyway. That is how they live, and they live they live happily, right? So
Well, yeah, those
like
are two different senses though, right? Because the inability to make noise is not the same thing as the inability to hear noise. And that's why he was trying to give her the hearing aid, because they can't make noise. Now, she doesn't hear the noise. And yeah, they want to be able
right.
to talk and hear things, sure. But like, they can't make noise, but at least they can hear what's going on so they can hear the danger. And she
So
can't.
he wants her to be able to hear so that she can protect herself.
Yeah.
So that she
I think.
understands
I mean, I
the
think so.
sound that she's making.
I think so.
Yeah.
So that she can,
Well,
like be when he's gone, and the baby cries,
true.
you know,
Yeah.
um,
She
uh,
would need to be able to
yeah,
sense that or be aware. I mean, yeah,
I don't
that's
know. I don't
true.
know.
I think it's ultimately about like survival.
Yeah.
I mean, John Krasinski, he said that this movie was ultimately about parenting,
Yeah.
about trying to protect your children. So I think the point about like it being two things kind of simultaneously
Mhm.
is very much like being a parent. It's like you love your child, you want to protect them, you want to give them. He's like, I want her to be able to hear so that she can protect herself.
Right.
From her point of view, she's like, that's not what I want, right? So
Sure.
I think they're highlighting maybe that parenting, it's not easy, right? There's
Yeah.
not like a one, like here's the right path.
Yeah.
And maybe that's sort of the experience of, if you're a deaf person watching the movie, you're like,
Mhm.
okay, I kind of get what they're trying to do, but I'm also kind of conflicted for these other reasons.
Yeah.
And that's parenting, that's survival, that's
True.
like
True.
being part of a family, is this conflict.
Yeah. It's interesting.
Wait, there's one more thing. I learned a new term when I was reading about the movie, and the
Mhm.
term is called deaf gain.
Deaf gain.
And it's kind of deaf gain.
Okay.
And it's the idea that like instead of when you think of, some people are born deaf, but other people are born hearing and over their life, lose hearing. So, but the idea is like instead of referring to it as hearing loss,
Right.
referring to it as gaining deafness, it's
Interesting.
your deaf gain. And the idea that like you're not well, you might be losing something, but you're gaining something else. And
Okay.
so by perceiving the world in a different way,
Hmm.
deaf people can um find other ways of like interacting, or like you can innovate in different ways because of their experience. So like an
Right.
example that I read is like the idea of a football huddle
Mhm.
originated with deaf people. The idea of an umpire using like hand signals to communicate with a pitcher
Yeah.
originated from a deaf person.
Interesting.
So hearing
Like you
people
gain
don't.
perspective.
Yes. So like I think maybe that's the little thing I'm trying to say that's like missing from the film, is what was the perspective that Reagan added to the family
Yeah.
because of her deafness. And they got to it at the end, but it was just a little bit of a like
I don't think the movie was about her. And I'm not saying this as
mm,
like a feeling of one way or the other about the representation of the deaf community, right? But like, and I think because if you go down the rabbit hole of looking at these articles about the representation, like there's a lot of we've just had a big discussion, but I don't think the movie was about her. I think the
yeah, that's a good point.
movie was about what he wrote
The
it
family.
about protecting your children. Now she
Right.
was a star in that because she was the oldest child.
Yeah.
She had a heavy heart, like she felt responsible for her brother's death. But at the end of the day, it was about them trying to do what they could, like and 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 so you could have made it about her, but it would have entirely changed the story, and it probably wouldn't have been a horror movie about aliens. The movies that
Mm,
appropriately represent that probably aren't going to be this movie about aliens. And it could
yeah.
be, and it could be. I'm not saying it couldn't be, but it's a very different story, and it's probably co-written by someone else, right? Like
Yeah.
that is trying to represent that.
I hear what you're saying, and it makes me think of like um media with gay characters.
Yeah.
And honestly, I feel like oftentimes I prefer movies or TV shows where there happens to be a gay character.
Hmm.
They're represented, they're part of the story, but it's not about them.
Yeah.
It's not about being gay. It's just, oh, there's a gay character. The reason I like that is because it very much just normalizes that like there are gay people in the world, and even though we think the world revolves around us, it doesn't always revolve around us. So
Wow,
I mean,
that's the
I
first
kind
time I've heard you admit that.
well, more to come. No, I mean, maybe I see your point. That like it's not, the movie isn't about the deaf experience. The
Mhm.
movie is about a family trying to survive in a world where noise can get you killed, where one of their children also happens to be deaf.
Yeah. Yeah. That's what I think.
Okay, cool.
Interesting. Okay, cool.
Okay, cool.
Oh, that's funny. It's very interesting though, and I'm glad that you brought that up because I hadn't really thought about it from that perspective, and it is interesting, right? Like anytime that you have representation of a certain sort in of any sort in a movie, it's going to raise questions about making sure that it's done so appropriately. But what is that balance, right? Because you said how you feel about like I'd rather have it just be a normal character doing their normal life. Oh, and they're gay. But then there's probably people on the other side of the fence too that are like, well, I think that they should have,
Mm,
highlighted it more. And I guess that's why there's a million movies out there and a million stories out there. And it kind of depends. Like I think there's place for both. I think there's place for
mm,
movies like that, stories, right? And what the what the writer's trying to convey.
I will say I very much enjoyed it.
Oh yeah,
Like I enjoyed watching the movie and thinking about what their experiences would be like. I wonder how the movie would be different if it had been written or co-written or co-directed or something by a person who is deaf. And I
Yeah.
did read that they had consultants on set who helped with
Sure.
like ASL.
Sure.
But the creation of the story, I just wonder, and I'm curious what A Quiet Place 2 is like, and if it pulls on this thread more, or
we'll have to watch it. So I've seen it. Spoiler alert, I don't really remember because I just forget things because I've seen a lot of movies, but I have seen it. But now we'll have to watch it kind of from a different lens and just kind of see, like you said, and then kind of go back to some of those, same sources and just kind of see what people felt about it, or see if it leans a little bit more in one direction. Now that the father's gone, the daughter's a little bit older, and she kind of has this like, what do they do with that? What do they do with that? It'll be interesting to see.
Yeah. I do know that there was an intention to be respectful and to appeal to the deaf community, or to connect with the character at least, because trivia. I have some trivia for you. John Krasinski, when he edited the film, he said he did the first 2 cuts of the movie without any sound in an attempt to connect with the characters, and the intention was like they want the movie to be able to work without any sound.
Right. That makes sense.
I think there was some music, but it was pretty minimal.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. It was mostly just like tension building. Yeah. And that's really interesting because it's what I talked about the facial expressions and how good it was, because they took away our ability to hear because everyone was being quiet. And especially when they did, I think pan to her perspective a couple times. She sees her father and she sees the thing. And so it's interesting that they played it back with no sound. And that makes sense. It makes sense that if you're trying to be respectful, that you would like say, well, how can I make this like an enjoyable movie to a community that we're all involving in this? So it's interesting.
That's fun. Making connection here. The interesting thing about facial expressions
Mm-hmm.
is when, and I don't know this from experience, I only know this from reading books and watching TV, but when you sign an ASL, your face is included as part of what you're trying to communicate. So different signs might convey different things depending on what you're conveying with your face. So as an actor, you kind of think, no, I can't. but I 100% have read that, or I don't know. I watched quite a bit of Deaf U on Netflix. Which is Gallaudet University, following the stories of students who are deaf and watching the way that they interact. Oh, it's so fascinating, the deaf culture. Again, I don't want this to sound like glamorizing, sensationalizing, like, oh, it's just for entertainment. But it's a show, and it's a really great show, and it's a really cool way to learn about a community of people with a really unique view of the world. So anyway.
Sure. The last thing, and just to kind of bring it full circle, just because I realized that I didn't say this, going completely back to the whole genius thing, but the last thing I wanted to say, because we talked about the parents protecting them and that kind of being the through point. And I guess until we talked about it just now, I hadn't really thought about it being like that's kind of, I could see why that was John Krasinski's like driving force in it. There was a couple parallels that I caught in the movie.
To The Office?
Yeah. Like when he is in the house and he opens the drawer and there's a stapler in the Jello. That's how you get staplers not to make sound.
Quiet. Exactly.
See? So now all their papers are... No, that's not what I was going to say. Anyway.
Do your quiet paperwork.
Yeah, a quiet paper company. Places or company. Nope. Okay.
Fast forward through that one.
Yeah. but a couple parallels that I made note of. So the guy in the forest that screams. It's kind of a weird, arbitrary, like it's like just happens, right? Like it brings us all tension and makes us scared for a minute. But the scream is very similar to his scream at the end. The way the guy just like screams, and it's like he has given up, and that is the scream that puts everyone in danger. And then you flip to the end of the movie, and that is the scream that saves their life, right? And then that's kind of a loose parallel, but it's the only 2 screams in the whole movie.
No, there was another one. She screams while giving birth in the bathtub.
No, she cries out. She cries out. There's difference.
Well, okay, so
she cries out in intentional. Pain.
Yes.
A cry is
Yes.
not a
It
scream.
wasn't a suicidal scream.
Correct.
Okay, whatever. Same
Like,
thing.
no, it's not. It's not, because as I was saying it, I thought, does that count? And then I did some analytics in my head, and I said that doesn't count. She cried out in pain.
Okay.
But that one was muted out by the but anyway. So
Fireworks.
And then, what was the code word for the fireworks? It was rockets. So
I didn't catch that.
So yeah, so I don't remember exactly how he said it, but he referred to them as rockets. He knew they were fireworks, right? I feel like, and I don't know, I could be making stuff up. What do we do here in this podcast? We find meaning where there's not.
We make shit
But
up.
we make shit up and we're like, oh, they totally meant this stuff that we realized after watching it that no one else has ever really figured out, and there's no articles about it. But at the beginning of the movie, the sound of a rocket took away his child. At the end of the movie, the sound of the rocket saved his child being born. So like it's a weird replacement, one child for the other. They couldn't protect that child. This child, they had the baby box, they had the oxygen, they had the soundproof room. It was almost like, this is our chance to do it again. And so their rockets were launched while she was giving birth. And I feel like there's a parallel there. And otherwise, why would he not just say fireworks? I feel like, I don't know. Maybe.
No, that is kind of interesting. That like maybe what allowed them to be as attentive to detail and focused on survival as they were was the fact that they had suffered such a hard loss.
Yeah.
Clearly, the rest of the world, so much of the rest of the world, didn't make it through this apocalypse.
Yeah, but they did.
But they did, and maybe that loss is what they had that ever present in the back of their brains of like,
which
all it takes is one mistake.
Which leads me to the one mistake. Why was that nail just casually bent over in the board so that someone could yank it up?
Well, it's got to be pretty hard to get a nail out of wood without making a lot of noise.
Okay. Well, maybe they should have painted around it. All right. Put a piece of carpet on it.
I mean, you're not wrong.
You're right. They couldn't like hammer it out. Okay.
That's true. I mean, I thought about that because I was like, wow, they've thought through everything. Why did they leave this nail here? But like, I mean, that's a tough one. How are you going to get it out?
That's true. Well, get it out through the foot. That's what's stepping on a nail. That's
glue. They could have used wood glue. They could have put another piece of wood on top.
But that would have creaked over time, though. Yeah, I don't think so. This is why you're not going to survive the Quiet Place aliens.
Ladder.
I got you back.
Ladder.
I got you. A ladder?
Thanks.
What?
Yeah, instead of stairs. Build a ladder.
Oh, so that they go
up and down the ladder.
No, ladders creak too. Come on, Tim. My chair creaks while I'm recording. Like, we'd be recording this podcast completely silently so that if the aliens don't get us, my chair would creak and we'd be dead.
I would just go live by the waterfall.
It was interesting. I mean, let's not start finding plot holes. At some point, we should probably move on. But it is interesting, though, that was the first time he'd taken his son to the waterfall in a year to say, hey, let's learn this lesson. Let's have a conversation. Hi, my name's Lee. I'm your father. Nice to hear your voice. You want to sing a song? Here, let me teach you about the Beach Boys.
Yeah. I mean, it's risky every time you walk out of the house.
I guess you're right.
The kid was terrified.
It did sound like it was the first time he was taking his kid with him. It seemed like maybe actually like his kid was not used to going with him. Maybe they left the kids at home for the vast majority of that year. Maybe after that, they were like, we're not taking the kids in town anymore.
Right.
And so that was his take, because his kid was scared shitless. And he didn't want to go. Interesting. So what do you think, kind of leading to the next piece, on the, our newly founded, I mean, I think I know the answer to this. This is actually a pretty easy one. But on the 3 types of horror, as stated by Stephen King, there's the gross out, the terror, the horror. I mean, I think I know the answer to this. But what do you think?
I think that when we see the alien, that is element of horror.
Yeah, because he looks horrible.
But the whole concept around trying to protect your family in this world where you can't make any sound is horror. In fact, I think earlier we called it.
I think it's terror.
Terror.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm mixing them up now. It's terrifying. It is terrifying.
Yeah, I agree. Like I said, this one was kind of an easy one. I just think that since we found that, it's kind of fun to do. But and per Stephen King's assessment of this, like that's the hardest one to do. That's the best one, the terror. And I think
Do you
that
want to know what Stephen King said about this movie? He said, "A
when I
Quiet Place
talked
is
to
an."
him, when I talked to him, he didn't say anything.
Oh, is this before or after your mom talked to him?
Yep.
That feels like a dig at your mom, and that's not how I intended it. It's just
Ooh, I'm
that
gonna tell her.
in the episode with your mom, we spent a lot of time talking about Stephen King.
That's true.
Like, oh, Chris's mom. Okay. Melody, we love you, and I want to have you back anytime. Stephen King said, "A Quiet Place is an extraordinary piece of work, terrific acting, but the main thing is the silence and how it makes the camera's eye open wide in a way few movies manage."
Yep.
So he's a fan.
Yeah. See, I feel like he would be. Yeah. I agree. The terror is where it's at. The imagination. It would have been less so if we would have seen the aliens early on. So anyway, good job, Quiet Place.
Good job, Quiet Place.
For doing the thing, which leads me to your rating of the movie. So let's recap a little bit, okay?
Okay.
So we've seen a few movies this season, 5 to count. So The Nope was the first one. You gave it a 4. We watched Horns. Man, that feels like a long time ago, but you gave that a 0. You saw The Exorcist. You gave it a 10. Exorcist Believer, you gave like a 4 or something. The Menu, and this is where it gets good. The Menu, you gave a 7.
I stand by that.
And you stand by it. That's fine. That's fine. You're scared of bad food. But what do you think about this one? What's Sam think of A Quiet Place?
This one's pretty high because, like, okay, high. From the get-go, right? The shock of like losing a child from the very beginning, right? True. If you're close to your family and you have that familial attachment, like, holy shit, that's a way to start.
Yep.
And the concept in general is just really intelligent. And so the thought, I even read that like people going to the movie theaters bought fewer concessions because they didn't want to make noise eating popcorn and like sipping their Cokes. Right?
Which leads me to interrupting you on your thought of the number. How many times did you find yourself holding your breath in this movie? Did you catch yourself at all?
I didn't think about it, but I could see that being
I definitely, there was a couple times that I was like, okay, I'm holding my breath, that's ridiculous. But like I think probably during the childbirth thing, like she's in the tub and she's like holding her mouth and I'm just like
yeah.
And then I turned purple and I passed out and I waked up and I had to rewind it. I waked up.
Did you give birth to a baby while that was happening?
No comment. I plead the fifth. Back to your rating.
The concept is terrifying.
Yeah.
And of being in an environment where you're just constantly on edge of like anything that you do. I mean, yes, heart rate. Yes. So the monsters were pretty like, oh shit. Like, oh, when he goes in the water, we didn't even talk about that. When
he dove into the water and you're like, this guy can swim?
Oh, fuck. And they have the baby in the box. Just all of it was just, oh, it was like on edge constantly.
Yep.
I'm going to give it a 9.
Ooh, you're giving it a 9. That's way up there. That's way up there, Sam.
Up there.
Okay.
There was just a lot of emotion. There was a lot of tense moments.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. This is like a really big community just camping trip because it was a lot of tense.
Do you get it? Do we get to do joke ratings in addition to scary meter ratings?
What do you give that one?
How about we just choose that one?
9 out of 10?
Out of a 10, I would give that about a 3.3.
I feel like, well,
maybe if the movie had taken place in the woods and maybe that'd be a little too on the nose.
That would be too on the nose. Sam, you don't know how to judge jokes, but you also don't know how to rate scary movies. So moving on. I'm just kidding.
You know, I stand by my scary rating.
That's fine.
Well, what would you give this one?
I said about a 6 or 7.
A 6 or a 7. Okay.
But it's hard to say. Maybe even more like an 8. Like it was
what
definitely
was missing?
Up there.
What would make it scarier, do you think?
I don't know. What could you asked me this question and I'm never able to answer it, but what could you inject into this movie? A little bit of Paranormal Activity, maybe. But The Conjuring we rated super high. But I don't know. I think that I felt the tension the whole time. I watched it on a plane, but I even felt it on the plane that I was like, oh shit. On my little phone, I felt the tension, but it was only edge of my seat thriller tension. There wasn't like any like, oh god, I'm really scared. And
that's fair. I didn't have a ton of moments where I was like, Oh god, I'm really scared. I did want to look away when she came down on the nail.
Yeah.
I was like, and I kind of covered my eyes, but I was also still kind of watching,
Yeah.
doing like this thing. We should pick the next movie.
Should we?
Yeah.
I was gonna make one more joke.
Oh, okay.
You were talking
Final
when she
joke.
came down on the nail, and I was gonna be like, I really watched it, and I've been waiting the whole movie for that to happen. I was like, nailed it.
Nailed it. Okay, that's actually pretty good. I would give that joke a 10.
Okay, I don't really understand, but okay. So next episode, we're moving on. Quiet Place. Sam gave it a 9. Sam gave it a stamp of approval. I'm giving it 4. Quiet Place, great movie. So moving on to the next episode, we're circling back again to a theme that we did in season 1 that I'm very excited about. So we revisited sci-fi horror. Now we're bringing something back to life.
Zombies?
We're returning to zombies because I can't get enough of zombies in life. And man, the emotion that came from Train to Busan, oh man,
that was good.
It just pulls my heartstrings. But
not what I expected.
Not what either of us expected. Probably, even though I'd already seen it, but forgot, because that's what I do. I have horror movie amnesia. But I did something special this week. So this time I tried something a little bit different, and I asked ChatGPT, give me the joyous and fun version of the synopsis of this movie without giving away the plot or title.
This is how we suck people in. This is how we get them. Scary movie haters. Yes. What have we got?
I am almost really sad that this is at the end of the episode, because I read the first synopsis that came out of this, and I was like, this is so ridiculous. Sam is going to not know anything about what this movie's about. And spoiler alert, at least one of these, I read a synopsis to you before about last season, because it was on last season's, but you would never know it. So, do you want to hear what the first movie's about?
Yes.
Okay, here we go. Here's the joyous and fun version of the synopsis for this movie. In a world where alarm clocks are obsolete, a charming fellow wakes up to discover he's fashionably late to the most exciting party of the century. As he navigates the lively streets of a bustling city, he quickly realizes that the term fashionably late has taken on a whole new meaning. Get ready for a zany adventure filled with unexpected friends, high-energy chases, and a contagious spirit that spreads faster than the latest dance craze. It's a wild ride where every moment is a celebration and the party never stops. Can our fashionably late hero keep the good times rolling, or will he be fashionably undead? Join the fun and find out in this heart-pounding, laughter-inducing thrill ride. Get ready to dance, laugh, and maybe scream a little, but only from sheer excitement.
So there's something about being fashionably late. I think you said that like 4 times. What movie is all about being late?
You're not going to get it. I know why it's saying that, but it's ridiculous. Also, does that not just sound like a good time?
It sounds great.
The best
part, said there's like a best party of the century?
Yeah, which is probably, the apocalypse. And then it talks about unexpected friends, high energy chases, a contagious spirit, right? That spreads faster than the latest dance craze. So well done, ChatGPT. Any other things you want to talk about on that movie, or any guesses you have if you've seen it or not?
I have no guesses.
That's why this is so fun.
Many zombie movies,
well,
I don't think. Anyway, what's the second one?
Second one. In a dazzling sequel to the ultimate zombie shindig, our brave heroes find themselves invited to an exotic destination. Packed with sun, sea, and a whole lot of undead charm, this tropical paradise promises a vacation to die for, or, more accurately, to survive for. Join our lively group as they navigate this post-apocalyptic resort, where every corner hides a new surprise, and every wave could bring a splash of danger. With a hearty mix of laughter, heart-pounding action, and the occasional zombie conga line, this movie is the ultimate vacation thriller that will leave you breathless, and possibly checking under your beach towel for lurking surprises. So grab your sunscreen, your sense of humor, and get ready for a vacation you'll never forget. If you make it back, that is.
Do we think it's a White Lotus property that they're staying at?
Probably.
Look, I gotta hear option 3, but this one is pretty enticing. A zombie conga line?
Yeah.
It's at the beach.
I bet you there's not a zombie conga line. But yeah, at the beach, there's sun, there's stuff. It makes it sound pretty. They're doing ChatGPT does a way better job than I do of just like interjecting random fun. Yeah.
Yeah.
Are
Well,
you
it's
ready?
really hard.
Are you
We
ready
should
for
just
number
get our
three?
entire. We should just have ChatGPT script our entire podcast.
That wouldn't be less interesting. That
No,
it wouldn't be good. It would be.
It wouldn't be. It
It'd
wouldn't
be
be good.
great, probably.
Third movie.
Yeah, third and final. This one came out a little bit longer than the other ones, but it's fine. Here we go. In a world where school days are a bit out of the ordinary, meet an extraordinary young girl with an appetite for learning and a heart full of surprises. Set in a not-so-typical classroom, this film follows the captivating journey of a special student who is more than meets the eye. Think of it as a study session with a bite. As the school bell rings, get ready for a thrilling adventure that combines friendship, curiosity, and a dash of the unexpected. Our young heroine and her classmates embark on a journey that will have you on the edge of your seat with lessons that are anything but textbook. Will they make the grade? Or will the mysteries of their unconventional education lead to a pop quiz they never saw coming? Get ready to be schooled in suspense, laughter, and a few unexpected twists in this heartwarming yet chilling tale.
Okay, so option 1 is something about being fashionably late to the party of the century.
Party of the century.
Option 2 is in a resort at the beach with a zombie dance on.
Yep.
And option 3 is in a school where there may or may not be a pop quiz that results in everybody's death.
Young girl at a school. She's got an appetite and a heart full of surprises.
That is kind of interesting to me that I'm imagining like a Wednesday Addams type character as like a young female zombie as the lead.
Could be. I have not seen 2 of these movies. And you know what? And I'm just going to put this out there now. I might not actually tell you what the 2 that you don't pick are, because if they ever circle back, you know, we're going to get to the point where you're going to know what they are. So maybe I like to keep secrets from Sam.
You do.
It's like secret
you're like
Santa.
You're like the Scary Movie mastermind.
I am.
Dun, dun, dun.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Okay, well, I definitely know which one I want to pick. I definitely want to go with my gut.
Yeah.
I mean, come on. The sunshine,
so
the sunscreen at the
I'm
beach.
just going to put sunshine in any one that I want you to pick.
Sunshine and Chris Pine. Or no, not Chris Pine. Chris. That was a nice little zinger, though. A little rhyme. But no, Hemsworth. Remember, you were like, just put Chris Hemsworth in any description of a movie.
In this tale where Chris Hemsworth is on a beach tanning, pick that one.
That one.
Yeah.
Let's do number 2. I want to see, what are the zombies at the tropical resort? Do they get margaritas? Do they play volleyball? What zombie life on the island?
All of the above. So it's so funny that there's a zombie conga line, because there's a parallel there that, even though that's probably not real. So first of all, what I will say before I tell you anything, because I like to dangle it a little bit. That sounds inappropriate.
Yeah, you do.
Well, this one actually got the lowest Rotten Tomatoes score of the 3.
Oh,
but
no.
You are going to be excited about this one.
Oh, good.
For one particular reason. Because
it has Chris Hemsworth in it.
It has Chris Hemsworth in it.
No, it doesn't.
The first movie was No, it does not. The first movie was a movie I tried to get you to watch last season, and you still didn't pick it. I'm going to keep going back to it. Not going to tell you which one it is. The third movie actually got really good Rotten Tomatoes score and seems really intriguing. I think that might be a movie that has like a lot of depth to it, that we could probably find a lot to talk about, but I'm not going to tell you what movie it is. The movie you picked, the reason that I thought it was funny, because they talked about a zombie conga line, and just to remind you, it opens up in this dazzling sequel to the ultimate zombie shindig. Well, in the first movie,
Train to Busan Part 2,
in the first movie, there was a zombie cape. And so while not a direct sequel, this is a Korean movie called Peninsula that takes place 4 years after the events of Train to Busan.
What?
Yeah.
Wait, it's the sequel to Train to Busan?
Yes, it is a sequel, but I don't think there's any character overlap. It's like it's more like Peninsula, a Train to Busan story.
Is it the same maker, the same like people who made Train to Busan made Peninsula?
I don't know. You think I would know this before I put it in here, but let me look it up.
We'll figure it out for next week.
No, it's fine.
We'll come back.
It's fine. I could do like a 5-second Google. So while I'm looking that up, This movie is Peninsula. In some places, it says Train to Busan, Peninsula. I don't know if that's actually accurate. But it is directed by Sang Ho Yeon, which, surprise, is the same director from Train to Busan. And written by Sang Ho Yeon, right, the director, as well as Ryu Jong Jae. Again, apologies to anyone because my pronunciation of these Korean names is horrible. But the director also co-wrote the first one. So the director and one of the writers is back for the sequel. It stars Jeffrey Giuliano, Ray Lee, and Moon Woo Jin. IMDb gave it a 5.5 out of 10. Rotten Tomatoes gave it a 55%, but audience score gave it a 76. Yeah.
Train to Busan was a great movie. It was great storytelling and really touching. I thought it was fun to watch, so I'm hopeful that this one will deliver.
Yeah,
in the same way.
I will be interested because now I have not seen this, so I have zero expectations other than getting to watch a sequel. And for the record, though, Train to Busan like rocked Rotten Tomatoes. This one less so. So that's we never use that as a judgment, a prejudgment of the movie. But it's an interesting point. But I'm excited. That's actually the first time in Scary Movie Fright Night history that you have picked a sequel to a movie we've already watched. We haven't. It's not like we've done that many episodes.
That's not true. We did that with The Exorcist.
You didn't.
We literally just did.
You did. You didn't pick the movie.
You're
did
saying
a double
that
feature.
I randomly picked it. I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
I was like, we just did a sequel, dude.
Also, maybe I forgot. Okay, but you didn't pick it. That was.
And you're going to keep me in the dark on what the other two movies
I think so. Yeah.
Do you want to tell the audience though, and I won't listen? I promise.
You'll listen to the episode later.
Okay. Dang it.
One of the other movies was 28 Days Later because again, that was an early zombie movie that I watched.
I remember that one.
That I really want to watch again, and I will get you to watch it, even if it's 28 days later from now. And then the other one is a movie that came up on some lists, and I did some when I was looking for zombie movies. I watched the trailer. It's called A Girl with All the Gifts. It's relatively new. It's 2016. Looked interesting. But we'll circle back. We're probably not going to do zombies again this season, or maybe we will. But instead, you picked the sequel. Well, we should probably let everyone go. We've been jibber jabbering for like 12 years. And by we, I mean me. So thanks for joining us on today's episode where we explored and broke down A Quiet Place, and like the movie, not an actual quiet place, because they're not one and the same. Do us a huge favor. Whatever platform you're listening on or watching on, if you're on Spotify or YouTube, take a moment, rate, review, subscribe so you can get alerts, so you know we're coming, so that we can build up our listenership. If you aren't rating, reviewing, subscribing, then we can't beat the algorithm and we can't reach more people. And that's the only way we're going to grow to be the best podcast in the entire multiverse.
Oh my God, that's a really high bar for us to meet.
Well, no, I feel like by the end of 2024, it's possible. I'm not trying to do it by June. Come on, I'm being realistic.
Do you leave ratings on other podcasts?
Yes.
And reviews?
I do. Only the ones that ask me nicely.
That wasn't intended to be a gotcha. I was just curious, like if you which types of shows I liked. I will leave ratings and reviews for shows that I listen to repeatedly.
That is true. Same.
There's a small handful of shows that I keep coming back to.
I even paid for someone's Patreon one time.
Oh, yeah. Wow. Bougie.
It was $2 a month. It wasn't that much. Anyway.
Well, let's wrap this up.
Yeah. Friday night, friends, get out of here. Go have some dinner or some breakfast or whatever you're doing. If you're on your way to work, have a great day at work. Go watch Peninsula, read the subtitles, and then come back next time for Scary Movie Fright Night.
See you next time, everybody. Oh, crap. Chris, I have a PS for you. Something that
A
I forgot to
PS?
tell
Wait,
you
what's a
about from A
PS?
Quiet Place.
Postscript?
You know, like PS. One more thing. Okay, wait. This is trivia from A Quiet Place, and I
Okay.
thought this was really cool. In the opening scene, when they're like in this town looking for supplies, they were in a grocery store,
Yeah.
and everything had been raided. But guess what was still on the shelves? Potato chips.
Because they crunch.
Guess.
Oh, I don't want to live in that
Genius.
universe if I can't eat potato chips. I'm out of here.